morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the closing session of the 74th IREPAS meeting. As always, we will be able to listen to the findings of the IREPAS committees during this session. The chairman of the IREPAS committees will be sharing the findings of the respective committee meetings with us. And after we listen to the committee's findings, we will be able to direct our questions to the chairman and listen to their answers, comments, and opinions. Exciting times for the steel industry, long products industry, and scrapping market. The steel market, as the IREPAS motto says, the steel market always emerges like the phoenix bird.
That's what
And
happens.
we hope it will last. Shall we start with the Raw Material Suppliers Committee, Jens?
Sure.
Please.
So it feels a little bit better this time to sit in this session. Last time we were in Rome, the mood was not as healthy or strong as it is now. The prices for raw materials bottomed out fairly soon after last meeting in the fall, and we've had a lot of events after that meeting that have led to a healthier environment for the raw materials. We've had a weaker dollar, and we've had decisions from Chinese governments to lower excess capacity and a timetable and actual funds that will be spent to manage that. And I believe we have a US dollar that's the weakest in 17 months or something like this, and the euro is now trading at 114. The findings in the group, we had a good lively discussion amongst ourselves, and the feeling in the group was very much of a much more healthy environment in the current state. The volatility has grown, and we likely will see it stay in the marketplace. The sharp rebound in scrap pricing over the past 2 months has been led mainly by a less amount of exported billet from China, mainly due to Chinese domestic demand for their own products, and the lower amount of exports from China has led to scrap purchasing being demanded in markets which for a long time have been reliant on Chinese semi-finished steel products. So markets in the nearby shipping lanes have been having to again procure scrap. There's a healthier balance nowadays between billet and scrap, and we've seen over the past 3 or 4 years that iron ore based steel production has been taking market share from scrap based steel production, and over the past quarter it seems that for the first time really that we've seen the opposite happen. and which is a big reason for scrap having rebounded so quickly. There's a stronger demand in the market than there has been a supply availability. So the protectionism in various markets has of course also been an important factor. We've had continued anti-dumping duties being pushed for in the United States, which is strengthening domestic demand for scrap. We've seen India impose MIP during February, the minimum import prices for various steel products, which has essentially led to India becoming again competitive in the import markets for raw materials, which they haven't been for a while. So you've seen since February quite a substantial amount of material being shipped to India. And going forward, their demand seems to be fairly good. In the domestic markets of Europe, the availability for scrap has not been added as quickly as pricing has moved. There has been pockets where you can find material, and during the winter period when pricing was at a low point, the availability was very low, and it was perhaps not as interesting to sell material to recyclers, and it could possibly even not pay anything. So at the moment there are pockets of availability here and there, but the arisings has not been added in the same fashion that pricing has moved. Challenges in Europe are, for example, the credit insurance amongst European raw material producers have been cut in many places, and weaker corporations have had difficulty to gain enough credit insurance lines. So going forward, that will be a challenge when raw material prices have rebounded. So with a higher pricing, the lower availability of credit insurance will make it difficult. The Ukrainian export duty is around 10 euros now. It's been that way for a long time, and there's now discussions that the export duty may be raised to 35 euros, and this is being pushed by the domestic steel mills as a protection for their scrap generation, and it's still an ongoing discussion, but it seems that the current export duty may also continue. So it's a factor that that's been going back and forth because the domestic or the export availability has been shifting. In Italy also, the scrap generation was fairly low because there was some new legislation that you cannot purchase scrap from private individuals. So the material has been slowed. So going forward, the general feeling is that the current conditions are a lot more sustainable, and that there should be an improved environment, that the environment has improved a lot for business in general. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jens. Next one is Traders Committee, and representing Traders Committee, we've got Mr. Dan Baysal here.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We had very fruitful discussions on various different subjects. Our subjects were predetermined on the questions sent to us by actually the whole conference group. So we tried to discuss each one of them separately and come up with some, at least our consensus on them. And the first subject was the capacity reduction of the mills. And overall, the consensus was that at today's environment, with the prices, being at the level where they are, we do not expect much reductions by the mills. In fact, we do expect some of the mills, especially in the US, to increase their production. But we also discussed that there were some permanent shutdowns by certain mills around the world, like the Redcar in Russia, Nursan in Turkey, and certain unproductive and thinly financed mills in China, and along with a temporary reduction by actually halt of production by the Usiminas in Brazil, which is supplying the slabs to countries like Turkey. We also discussed the current situation, the spread between the iron ore and scrap. And it was concluded that the increase in iron ore versus the increase of scrap, there is no correlation. So there's a downward pressure on iron ore because of the oversupply, and it's in contradiction with the scrap situation, given both are for the same industry and same materials. We proposed we discussed the proposed reduction of capacity by the Chinese mills, and we have concluded that, number one, it's not the reduction of capacity, but it is really reduction of production. And the 150 million ton reduction that they're talking about is not really sufficient to make any effect on the export capacity that they have. And given the fact that they have, even yesterday on the presentation, said that they will be about 150 million ton reduction in their demand up until 2025. So net effect really will be zero for the exports, which is the one that really concerns all of us. There was discussions on whether the price reductions on the commodity prices will it affect the demand in construction, or will it improve the construction around the world? But we have concluded that the construction has very low correlation to the steel prices. It has much to do with the interest rates and the unemployment rate, or really a reduction of unemployment rate. VAT increases in GCC countries were discussed, and we were told that this reduction is maximum about 5%, and it's really not expected until 2018. So really no effect to us in the near future. Finally, I thought it was very interesting. We discussed about whether these price increases is supported by the demand in the world. We had voices from different parts of the world, and all concluded that there is really no immediate demand or demand increase or construction increase around the world. In fact, in certain parts of the world, the demand have really come down. So we concluded that the recent price increases were supply reduction related, which may be temporary. We all live in an oversupply of all commodities in the world, starting from oil to natural gas to iron ore and even capital. So with all this abundance, we do not think this is long-lived. That's what we discussed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next one is the Producers Committee. And representing Producers Committee is the new chairman of IREPAS, Mr. Murat Cebecioğlu.
Thank you, Murat. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Finally, exciting times for the steel industry. After a long, depressed period, now we seem to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So, hope this continues this way. Yesterday, at the Producers Committee, we have discussed different things. We went country by country, region by region, discussing what's happening in all those locations. Of course, today, the name of the game is China. It's very important and everybody is following what's happening there. And you know the recent developments, suddenly increase in overnight, increase in the Chinese billets, like $55, and increase in iron ore, about 20%, gave a boost to the market. And since then, since a month or so, the price is increasing. And this is also backed by most of the traditional markets today, and the local prices in those markets are increasing as well. So we hope that these prices will continue in the near future. Well, in general, in Europe, it's been said and we've been discussed that it's moderate growth is expected for the 2016. It's also expected that the construction sector, which is a leading factor in our steel business, will also be a better pace than 2015. Of course, the economy doesn't permit to grow much faster pace, but it's in a positive side and growing. When we look at the Gulf region in GCC countries, there are, especially in Dubai and in Qatar, because of in Dubai, you know, we have the Expo 2020, and in Qatar, there is the World Cup in 2022. Because of these activities, there will be new infrastructure projects, and these projects will also boost the steel prices and consumption of steel. And demand is there, and it's one of the traditional markets, and in the near future, nothing different is expected. When we look at the Ukraine, compared to 2015, which was not a good year, in business in general, the GDP fall, construction fall, but in 2016, it is expected to be on the positive side. So in Russia, in 2015, the economy shrank considerably and not expected to grow much in 2016. We'll see, you know, we'll have to follow it day by day, see what's happening. And finally, when we come to Turkey, the economy is okay, it's growing, expected to grow 3.5%, 4% next year. Total steel consumption is much better compared to 2015. There are lots of infrastructure projects, and Turkey is exporting more compared to previous year. And so, in general, things to be okay for the export business. And we do keep our hopes up for 2016, and all the indicators are showing us the positive signs. And we hope that it keeps this way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So let me try to recap, looking at my notes here. I understand the raw material prices are considered to be bottomed out after our last meeting in Rome, and there have been a lot of factors having an effect on this situation. First of all, the decision of the Chinese government to lower excess capacity in the country has played a role, and the weakening US dollar has also played a role. Obviously, the lower amount of billet exports from China led to more scrap purchasing in the markets, and I understand a healthier balance is perceived nowadays between billet and scrap. The Raw Material Suppliers Committee concluded that scrap-based production has turned out to be more advantageous compared to iron ore-based steel production. This has been a significant change in the market where iron ore-based steel production has had a long-term advantage, competitive advantage over scrap. So it has also had an impact on more scrap purchases. Stronger demand is seen in the market for raw materials. Protectionism has also been an important factor, and US domestic demand for scrap, for steel products pushed scrap demand upwards. In addition, the minimum import price implementation in India also played an important role, and a substantial quantity of scrap has been shipped to India since this February. Going forward, the Raw Material Suppliers Committee expects the scrap demand to be fairly good, but credit insurance may be an issue going forward, taking into consideration the increasing scrap prices. The discussions about the possibility of an increase in the export duty of scrap in Ukraine has been going on, but I understand the committee does not expect a quick change there, and the current implementation may continue. But overall, the committee concluded that the current conditions are sustainable as the environment has significantly improved, right? Traders may have a different opinion, though, I guess. The traders do not expect much reduction on the capacity utilization. On the contrary, some increases in the US are expected by the traders. The Traders Committee do not see a correlation between iron ore and scrap prices at this point of time. They see downward pressure on iron ore due to the excess supply in the market. The committee, the Traders Committee, thinks the production, significant production cut in China is necessary instead of capacity reduction. And 150 million tons, even if it turns out to be happening, will not be sufficient to enable the market to come to a healthy balance. I have noted that maybe a maximum 5% VAT increase in GCC countries come into effect, but not earlier than 2018. So no effect in short term is expected, is foreseen. But I think the most important conclusion of the Traders Committee is that they see price increases, the recent price increases were only supply reduction related, and they do not think the current situation will be long-lived. The Producers Committee, as we all agree, think that the situation in China is very important, and the increases in Chinese billet export prices, more or less $50 per ton, and 20% increase in iron ore prices have led to an overall increase in prices in the steel market. The committee expects moderate growth in the EU region in 2016, and they expect construction sector will be at a better pace there. On the back of the Expo 2020 in Dubai and the World Cup, which is going to take place in Qatar in 2022, a lot of new infrastructure projects are expected, and those will boost steel demand in the GCC area. Ukraine, in Ukraine, last year was not a good year, but this year is expected to be better compared to 2015. In Turkey, the economy is growing 3.5 to 4%. Steel consumption is better this year than last year. Construction activity is much better, and exports are also much better. Exports of steel are much better. So overall, the Producers Committee concluded that the export business in long products industry is good, and the outlook is also positive and good for the oncoming months, right? Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So I would like to continue with the questions that we have gathered for the IREPAS committees. But before I start with the questions I have here, I'd like to mention that we hope, once again, as always, this session will be an interactive one. So please stop me whenever you have any questions. And let me start by asking you if you have any questions at this point of time before I start with mine. Michael, can we have the microphone? Please.
For the arrangements of this IREPAS conference, Murat and SteelOrbis. I was thinking the blend of having the BNP and Commerzbank coming in and talking at a higher level than what we are doing, and the members of IREPAS are basically very all price sensitive. I mean, if the rebar price for a rebar mill goes down €5, there's a crisis meeting. If it goes up 10 euros, there's a crisis. There's a discussion about where the market can go. The same thing is true for the scrap people, and it's the same true for the people who are buying the scrap. But is steel usage really price sensitive? I mean, if you think about, if you're hungry for an apple, whether the apple costs €2 or 50 centimes is irrelevant, because you want an apple and you pay the price from the merchant. And BNP and Commerzbank, especially Commerzbank, is talking about that all of the brilliant central bankers around the world, they're very concerned that there's no inflation. And here we had in January 2015, rebar prices of $550. And then 1 year later, we had prices that were $320. And now the prices are going up. But for us in the Traders Committee meeting, we were talking about where is the price going and so forth, and why are the prices going up? Is there more demand? I think everybody here in the room can agree that there's not really more demand, it's just that the prices are different. And so doesn't that prove the fact that steel is at the end of the day price insensitive, and if the market believes that the prices are going up, the prices will go up. But the consumption is not going to decrease. So just some thinking, and thank you again for the Commerzbank and BNP perspective, which I think is looking at the high level while we're down on the floor trying to make €1 more or save €1 a ton.
Michael, to answer your question, and I think you already said that the same, the steel usage is not really price sensitive. If you're going to build a building, you're not going to say that, well, I'm not going to build the building this year because the price of steel is high. Or if you're going to build a bridge, you do not say that, well, let's not build the bridge this year because the price is high. So price is, in fact, when you look at, let's say, many different uses and not only buildings, let's say even in pipe usage that we have in the oil industry, it's only 5% of the whole cost of, let's say, drilling. And I think the rebar is probably less than 5% in the building costs and apartment building costs as well. So when you have such low, the percentage of the total construction, no, it's not the main thing. But as we negotiate everything, we like to negotiate everything. We negotiate the price of cement, we negotiate the price of steel, we negotiate because we want to bring the overall costs down. And that's probably, you know, why we're always discussing the prices. But I think the demand has really nothing to do with the price going up and down. That's my opinion.
I think, I mean, the prices are always, it's a factor of supply demand. But I would agree that most commodities are, in my opinion, price insensitive. But at the end of the day, the prices fluctuate because of supply demand situation, right?
People make more long-term planning that is deliberate when they feel that the prices are going up. That's human nature.
Well, there's also exchange of things. Let's say if, I mean, if you're the steel producer and if you have options of both, if this price of, let's say, the scrap goes up and iron ore goes down, you turn to use iron ore more, or there's an exchange, or if you're going to build a building and if in your environment the structural steel is much more expensive than the rebar, you tend to build your building with a, let's say, concrete rather than the steel structure. So there is some choices in between the commodities possible, but overall, when you're going to build a bridge or a highway or a high rise, this price of steel up and down really does not matter.
Thank you. Any other comments?
No, I agree that the price of the steel really doesn't matter so much as long as it is, you know, we have to know what is low, what is high. I mean, the prices of steel in the beginning of the year and at the end of 2015 came to a point that those prices, those levels were not sustainable. It was, you know, everybody was losing. So there was something somewhere wrong. This was not normal, and it had to move up. So no matter what the price is, as long as there is this balance in demand and supply, this price will be realized in the market somehow. And today it's moving up because, I mean, the main factor was, again, China was playing a major role, and now they are not there. So the prices are moving up in a way.
Thank you. Any other questions at this point from the floor? I guess so. Let's move forward. This question is actually already been responded in general, but let me read. How do the IREPAS committees interpret the recent price increases in steel products? Is the global oversupply problem over all of a sudden? Is China's recent export policy the driving force? What will happen if China changes this policy? The committees have already responded this question in a way from their perspectives, but are there any other things to add? All three chairmen, please. Jens?
I think we said also that the volatility is here to stay, and I don't think that all of a sudden any problem is going to be over. So the current situation is a little bit, you know, more sustainable, but I would think that the oversupply problem is not all of a sudden over. It's it's going to take a long time.
Well, the global, you know, oversupply is there. I mean, if you want to look at the iron ore, there's more supply of it, and the scrap, if there's not scrap, you know, they can produce the hot briquette iron from iron ore and still supply. And 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 if you want to look at the other side, it's the capacity in China, 1.1 billion tons. No, there's a huge global oversupply there, and Chinese policy is a short-term policy. They wanted to increase the prices, so I think that after this effect, I'm sure they're going to go back and try to push as much as they can.
Thank you.
Well, in the short term, I don't think there will be any changes in their policies. The oversupply issue, of course, is there. The traditional markets have been really squeezed, and everybody is attacking up to those markets to get their share. So in China, when we look, there are capacity cuts, and they were losing heavily. And as we were talking, China is the main driver. They are producing half of the world's production. So I really don't see any changes in their policies in the near future. But of course, things will change eventually, but not in the short term.
Thank you. This time, all committees, I think, agree. Oh, sorry.
I just want to say something is, from the producer's point of view, is that, well, basically oversupply what created is a terrible economic result for everybody in the world. And we have seen that billions of dollars being burned. And that was the reason why a good number of players, we took the same decision, because it was purely an economic decision. It was the last X million tons, it's not worth at all to produce them. And one way or another, people that was producing steel in the steel sector realized that steel maybe was not a nice place to be. And they are still, I mean, it's not that suddenly something has happened and that's gone. No, there's a current now in the steel business. We have said, I think today, finally, Tata achieved to get rid of Chorus. Mm-hmm. We don't know how. I mean, and obviously the consequences would be that probably will be a change in Chorus, new dimensions, new products, but Tata finally get rid of and that was the intention of Tata. Tata just wanted to get rid of Chorus. And this is more of that now coming. And not only in China, okay, China is 50% of the production, but the other 50% of the production is in the Western world. And the Western world, the investors, they need to make money. If they lose money in a business, they run away. As simple as that. And that's gonna continue. And that's not gonna get resolved with an increase of $100. I mean, people, big guys, they want to get rid of steel plants, of steel mills. And that's gonna happen.
Thank you. Thank you. Moving to the next question. This is for the Raw Material Suppliers Committee. Yes. We understand that scrap prices are affected by the increases observed in the semi-finished and finished steel prices. But scrap suppliers still complain about the insufficiency of scrap flow to yards. This is puzzling. In the middle of harsh winter conditions, we were able to find scrap at $174 per ton without many problems in supply. Since then, scrap prices have risen by more than 40%. How is it possible that today's prices are still not sufficient to boost collection levels, especially when collection is much easier due to improved weather conditions? This sounds like a frustrated customer. Yeah. So how do you handle customer complaints?
Yeah, things don't go this fast in the supply chain. We've had a declining scrap price curve since, I think, February 2011. And of course, prices have moved up and down, but in general, the trend has been downwards. And the supply of scrap, or the generation of scrap, has has been slowing in general over the time. And if the price moves by 40% in a few weeks or a month, then it doesn't automatically mean that all of a sudden there's a huge amount of scrap available. There's when there's a low price like this, which we've seen over the past years, you see that less scrappings is taking place, and less generation of material is available. So I would guess that if we have a sustained higher pricing, if in the market, if the market prices remain fairly steady or in a positive atmosphere, then I do believe that there will be a higher generation of scrap going forward. But it doesn't just happen overnight or in a few months' time. It takes time. So it takes some time.
Thank you. Nothing happens all of a sudden, once again. Okay. Moving on to the next question. This one is directed to the Producers Committee. Chinese domestic demand for semi-finished and finished steel has improved ahead of the horticultural expo in Tangshan, and this situation is likely to continue in the coming period. Thus, Chinese billet export offer prices are not expected to indicate any significant decline, just like ex-CIS billet prices. In this context, do you think Turkish steel producers will continue to purchase scrap instead of billets, or at some point will scrap prices be too high to be accepted?
Well, thank you, Murat. The answer to my idea is not so difficult. It's quite simple. We have to look at the cost of producing rebars from imported billets from China or CIS compared to rebar produced from scrap. If there is a balance in these, so people will prefer to produce from scrap and we will not buy billets. And if this goes the other way around, of course, the Turkey or the producers will import billets from China or CIS countries. This was the case in most of 2015, when they were producing from billets imported from China compared to rebar produced from scrap, the difference was like $100. Today, that doesn't exist anymore. We also we have to take into account, I think, the lead time, on-time deliveries, and reliability of getting the billets from China. I think it also plays an important role.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the floor? Okay, moving to the next question. This is for the Traders Committee. The export activity of Chinese suppliers in the global market has become less aggressive in the past few months, as Chinese producers are focusing on domestic buyers. How long will this situation continue, giving other foreign exporters the opportunity to increase their export volumes and prices? What would you think?
Well, I really don't think the Chinese suppliers are less aggressive. I mean, they were trying to, get the price higher, but that really is the end result of the certain, unproductive or thinly financed small mills were forced out, and also they have the environmental regulation being applied, and that really have reduced some of their production. But China still has 110 million tons of extra capacity to export, so they will do that. So I don't think they will ease it at all. In fact, we've been getting calls from China every day for trying to offer billets and wire rod and whatnot. So nothing really changed.
Only the prices.
Yeah.
Okay. No questions. Moving on to the next one. This is for everybody to comment on. The US Federal Reserve's monetary policy is of great importance for the global economy. No further increase has been made to interest rates in Q1. What is your prediction for future actions by the US Fed? How are these going to affect the steel markets? Would you like to start, Don?
Okay. Fed has been holding any price in any interest rate increases since 2006. So in December, when they went up 0.25%, that was the first time since 2006. So, and the market really reacted negatively to it. So Fed has been considering to increase the rates again in the first quarter, and in the March meeting, they decided not to do that. Now, overall, I understand that it's their goal to increase the rates by about 1% throughout the year, and they passed it on the first quarter. I don't know what they will do on the second or the third quarter, depending on how healthy the economy is, and more important, the unemployment rate in the US, which actually is going down. As discussed yesterday, small inflation is a good thing for the countries. I mean, when I say small inflation, inflation between 2 to 3% is actually healthy. It definitely is very healthy for us, the steel distributors. We do not like stagnant economy where the prices remain the same like in Japan for years. We like to see that small increases. So as steel traders, we welcome the idea that perhaps the interest rates go up slightly, however, not more than, let's say, 3%.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Well, of course, U.S. Economy is a leading force in the world. Whatever happens there affects the rest of the world. As he says, as Don said it also, the interest rates are quite low and supposed to grow. The market is supposed to grow, and we have to have some kind of inflation. But this doesn't happen, as discussed yesterday in the, by the speakers also. And somewhere something wrong. And it's cheap to borrow, you know. That means people should borrow and invest more, have more jobs. But on the other hand, unemployment is not doing well in the States. But the low rates in the States, you know, capital flow might happen to the third, you know, in the developing countries. That might help the growth in those regions. So it's really a question of the policies of what happens in the near future. So we need to just keep close watch and act maybe the economies accordingly.
I remember the high interest rates and actually the high inflation times in South America, Turkey, where the distributors never made a mistake, because whatever price you buy, you will definitely gonna sell it at a higher price. So it was really great thing for the distributors and awful thing for the consumers. So eventually, and obviously, thank God that it all went away, and we all have, throughout the world actually, very low inflation environment.
Okay.
So ever since the Federal Reserve decided to draw back the quantitative easing and start raising interest rates, we've seen the dollar rise steadily, and which has been highly negative for raw materials and commodities in general. Up until the Federal Reserve actually did raise interest rates, when we saw the dollar actually weaken a little bit, because the forward curve has, the projection from Federal Reserve has been lower than anticipated. So it's actually seen some weakening in the dollar, and that's been positive for commodities. So, and that's what I understand generally happens when there's when the reserve is about to start raising interest rates. The opposite thing happens. The dollar actually weakens a little bit, because the strength had already happened before. So I think it's fairly good for commodities that there's a normalization of the interest rates.
Thank you. Any other comments from the floor or questions maybe? Moving on to the next question. This one is directed to the traders. Although China has announced plans to eliminate 100 to 150 million metric tons of excess steel capacity, Chinese steelmaker Baosteel, whose huge Zhanjiang steel production base with a capacity of 9 million metric tons will start operating later this year, has said that it expects its steel output to rise by 20% in 2016. Also taking into account that China's planned steel capacity cuts are to be spread out over the next 5 years. Is it fair to say that, being realistic, these capacity cuts in China will have little or no impact in terms of reducing the global steel supply glut? You have actually responded to a certain extent.
And again, I'm going to say that, like Mr. Li Xunchuan yesterday said, that China expects the consumption to go down to 550 million tons from the present 700 million tons. So that's really is 150 million ton. And ironically, the Chinese government came and said, well, we're going to reduce the capacity by 150 million tons. By that, of course, when you say capacity, it means nothing, because the capacity is actually 1.2 billion tons. So let's assume that they're going to really reduce the production by 150 million tons. The net effect to the exports is not going to change. So what's happening in China, and was discussed yesterday, is the old-fashioned mills still using coal and highly polluting the environment are being replaced by the newer mills like the Baosteel is doing. So you will see this transformation going forward. So China will have actually a more state-of-the-art mills, and it's going to be a tougher competition going forward to all of us.
Thank you. Moving to the next question. This is for the producers. According to the German Research Institute Prognos, the third phase of the EU emissions trading scheme entails extra costs for European steel producers, and this will prevent them from being competitive in the global steel industry. How do you think European steel producers can cope with this situation?
Well, it's a tough question. Well, of course, we are living in a very competitive market. Every penny counts today. Either they will have to find more efficient way of production, or maybe they will just be more focusing in their local markets or within Europe. And it has to be seen how much of a burden this emission control will bring to these mills. This has to be seen. But it will be, just remains to be seen, and I really cannot be sure of what the answer is going to be exactly, because there are so many variables in this thing, and it all depends their policies, how they like to handle the situation, and it depends how they want to be, how much they want to be competitive, and maybe this will be through certain periods of time, then the market and themselves will adapt to this situation. So I think that's what it is.
Thank you. Any comments from the European producers, maybe? No. Okay. Next question. Jens, you have already talked about this when sharing the committee conclusions with us. Yeah, Ukraine is considering hiking its scrap export duty to 35 euros per ton, in addition to its existing export quota. If the export duty goes up to 35 euros per ton, do you think this will probably halt scrap exports from Ukraine? And how would Turkish producers be impacted by such an increase in the export duty?
Yeah, the domestic scrap groups, they expect that it would severely dampen the export availability of scrap from Ukraine if it were imposed, which is what the domestic steel mills are trying to achieve. So the discussion continues.
Thank you. Still no questions from the floor. So I'm moving on to the next question I have here, and this is for the producers again. India announced a minimum import price for steel in February, after which domestic prices indicated an increase before switching to stable movement. What do you think can be done to control domestic prices? Do you think the increase in domestic prices could create artificial conditions for the imposition of anti-dumping duties?
Well, we will see more and more protectionism, that's for sure. Because when I look back, I represent one of the biggest mills in Turkey. Far East and Southeast Asia, like Hong Kong, Singapore, Bangladesh, they used to be our #1 markets. Every month we used to ship huge quantities. To Africa, we used to do very good business. But nowadays we don't have those markets. We can do business nowadays became our traditional market. There used to be no traditional markets. Everywhere, we were able to export. Today, what we can do is we can export to states, to GCC countries, to Northern Africa, time to time, some countries in Europe and some Latin American countries. So we have limited, the demand is limited in these countries. So everybody is focusing there to get their fair share of the market. And this is, of course, creating a kind of a price sensitive situation. And countries are trying to protect their local markets by putting us anti-dumping cases, CVDs, or safeguard measures. So this is what's going to be happening in the future. We'll see more and more protectionism in all these countries.
Do you think some of the pressure is coming from, let's say, African countries are more and more open to the Chinese mills products, and that also creates a pressure on your market?
It does, of course. As I said earlier, we used to ship good quantities to Africa, but they have not. Chinese are very active in African countries. They have their offices. They even have their rolling mills and all things, and they've been there for a long, long time. And with these prices, we have no chance to be there, especially in West Africa. We are having real problems to export in these markets.
Thank you. Next question, obviously for Raw Material Suppliers Committee. Do you think scrap demand from India will continue as it was in the first quarter following the introduction of minimum import prices for a number of finished steel products?
Yeah, so the demand in the Indian market has improved significantly over the past quarter, and it looks like the shipments of imported material, the imported material that's coming in from Asia is still in transit in some cases. So we likely will see the demand continue to pick up a little bit for imported scrap instead of purchasing steel into India. So yeah, I think the demand will continue to be fairly good, and the MIP will be running until July, I believe, and after that it sounds like they may continue it for another 6-month period. So at least, yeah, it looks like the demand will continue to be fairly good going forward during 2016.
What kind of quantity are we talking about here? As let's say monthly scrap imports of India.
Well,
on
I
average.
believe February, March demand was around 300,000 tons, which is a huge amount compared to what it looked like just a few months before. So it's good also that there are other markets which balance out the Turkish dominance a little bit.
Thank you. Questions from the floor. I'm moving on to the next one here. This is directed to the Traders Committee. Following the lifting of sanctions, what is the current situation as regards the reintegration of Iran, the biggest steel producing country in the Middle East and North Africa, into the global steel market? So far, in which steel markets have Iranian exporters been most active, and what impact have they had?
Yeah. Well, we do think that Iran is going to be a great market for us to sell our products into Iran. Today I read in Wall Street Journal that Boeing is ready to sell planes to Iran. Good news for America. But for steel business, it's not the same. I have learned that the Iran is actually becoming a net exporter. They are exporting billets into the Middle East and even to Turkey. So I think there will be there will be more exports coming from Iran, and I don't know what Iranian prices will be. So I guess this is something to be found out. But obviously, they were better priced than even China for them to be able to sell to Turkey. The future market for them will be the GCC countries, I think.
Thank you. Any other comments? No. Next question is for everybody to comment on. Do you experience or foresee any problems in the financing of trading of steel and or raw materials?
Yes, we do. I think that's the answer, and that will be getting more tougher. Even to get an LC from certain parts, the banks are really hesitant to approve or give confirmation to the LCs. So this is the way I see it. It's been increasing because we get a lot of LCs from different parts of the world, and in my country, like in Turkey, I mean, some banks are very hesitant to give confirmation to some LCs from some countries. So. And also, I think my colleague also talked about the, credit insurance issues. This might be a real problem in the future if the economy doesn't get better soon.
I do agree. I think it's getting tougher, and mills are changing hands today. Distributors are thinly financed. Banks are very uneasy with the changes, and they're not sure who will survive and who will not. Credit insurance is also a problem. I think the credit insurance companies are faster to really drop the companies than we even know what's going on. So overall, it's tougher conditions in a financial environment for all of us.
Sorry. Any other comments? Any comments from the floor? Maybe from the banking side? No? Okay, moving on to the next question. This is for the Producers Committee, Chairman. In January this year, Turkey's rebar export volumes rose by 17.4% year-on-year, with significant increases observed in tonnages delivered to destinations such as the UAE, Egypt, the US, and Israel. Is it therefore possible to speak of a bright outlook for Turkey's rebar exports in the current year? What impact will the recalculation by the US Department of Commerce of the anti-dumping duty for rebar imports from Turkey have? What other destinations may prove fruitful for Turkish rebar exporters in 2016? They're looking for some hints.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult. As I just answered in my previous questions, these countries like UAE, USA, Egypt, Israel, some of the Latin American countries today are the traditional markets for Turkey. And demand in these countries are good, and it's increasing. So Turkey, when we compare the first we have 3 months of this year, the exports are increasing and will keep increasing the way we see it today. When we come to the redetermination on the anti-dumping case, so I'll give you a timeline. I mean, this is really what's happening today. On the 7th of April, DOC, Department of Commerce, issued remand redetermination, its final decision, and gave it to the court. Now, lawyers will be briefing with the court of redetermination, which will take another 3 to 4 weeks. And if judge agrees with the commerce redetermination, he affirms the orders, which will take another couple of weeks. And then, of course, the mills will appeal this to CAFC, Appeal Court of Federal Circuit. If judge disagrees, he will send it back to commerce redetermination, and things will start all over again. But with this 3.64% they are talking about today, it's not going to happen before the May the 1st. I mean, if any time after May, this 3.64 can be affirmed, can be approved. So this is how the things is going to develop.
Thank you. Any comments or any questions? No. So moving on to the next one. This is for the Raw Material Suppliers Committee. Hence, recent increases in iron ore prices seem to be stimulating other producers to return to the market. We are beginning to see signs of re-emerging producers, exporters in Africa, India, and the Americas, especially Brazil. We expect to see more in the coming months. Do you think this could be a sufficient reason to cap iron ore prices? And is this something that the big producers would prefer not to do? What is the highest level at which the big producers would like to keep prices?
Yeah.
This is a crystal ball question. The traders think iron ore prices are under extreme supply pressure. What do the raw material suppliers think?
Yeah, I mean, it's of course a difficult question to answer, but I don't think that there's any specific price that anybody wishes to try to keep there. I think they're just trying to be as competitive as they can and cut their costs as much as they can. And I don't think that the short-term pricing blips will be enough to get new mining facilities in place. So I think that the big miners will continue to push for their continued supply advantage into China, and it's all about the Chinese demand and the big three's supply.
Do you think there's a push from the 4 big suppliers to get the smaller suppliers out of the market, so keep the prices low, to make the smaller guys uncompetitive, so they can get out of the market, and then once they get out, they can freely increase their prices?
No, I don't think so. I think it has to do with their shareholders, and that their shareholders expect higher dividends, and to get a dividend, you either have to have a high price and a volume, or you have to have a low price and a larger volume. So I think that the main factor is to try to keep their shareholders happy.
So which one did they choose?
I mean, they're in a difficult spot because the pricing is lower than they had probably hoped for, and so they need to jack up their production, which has to be at low costs, right?
Thank you. We have also heard Eric Louer's opinion yesterday. Anything to add based on this question, Eric? Can we have the microphone for Eric, please? Portler.
Yes, actually, I think that the miners which have been ousted from the markets are mainly the Chinese high-cost and low-grade producers, because, for instance, the other exporters on the seaborne market, the Russians, the Ukrainians, they benefited from the ruble and hryvnia depreciation, so they are still here with decent margins, and it has affected some projects, but not steel producers in Africa. But apart from that, I don't think that the oligopoly is really playing like an oligopoly, which may try to really control the prices. Billet, for instance, has a huge project which will come with 90 million tons. There are other independent producers. Not long time ago, it was 3 producers. Now it's 4. Now it may be 5 with Roy Hill, and so it's. I think low iron ore prices are here to stay, especially if, as Mr. Lee said yesterday, Chinese consumption decreases from 700 to 550.
What do you call low iron ore prices? Which price is low? Because I understand 100 is high. What is low?
Low is 40 and around 40. That was, by the way, that was the level in during many years before 2000. The FOB price Brazil was around 20. So
That's right. That's right. But at those kind of prices, not a lot of iron ore suppliers can survive, right?
the Brazilians and the Australians, they have a FOB cost of
The big
20,
ones, yes.
25. So
Yeah.
the main difference is if the freight obviously will increase, and because the cycle is much shorter because you scrap vessels, etc. It's not so. When the price, CIF China will increase because just of the freight, not because of the FOB price.
I see some correlation similar to what happened in the oil industry, where certain big producers wanted to get rid of the smaller producers in the U.S. and they just lowered the prices to a point where the high-cost, smaller production oil companies couldn't survive, and one by one they just exited the market. And after they exit the market, obviously the hope is to come back and increase the prices back up again. Do you think the same scenario is being played?
No, I don't think that they will control really the market. It's a deliberate strategy to reduce competition. And even for oil, people say that as soon as the oil price will rebound, the small producers in the US, they will come back. So not sure that it's really...
Not the ones that go under?
Yeah, difficult to say, but...
Thank you. Thank you very much, Eric, for your contribution. Let me move to the next question. This is for the Traders Committee. Do you think China should be granted market economy status? How do you think granting market economy status to China would affect the steel trade and trade measures?
Well,
it's a political one.
I know. I have to say my personal opinion. I don't think China has a perfect market economy. So I don't think it's time to grant the status. Not yet. However, I think it's a good thing for China to be a market economy. And it's better for all of the world trade to work with each other in a level playing field. Also, for the producers here, if the China has the market economy, then you know it will be tougher to impose those anti-dumpings onto China with those high rates, because then they will be considered the same. So it will be a different playing field at that time. But it's obviously a good thing to see this such large economy and half of the world production to be in the same level field with the rest of the world.
Thank you. Now, next question here is for the Producers Committee. In the past several months, many steel producers have lost some of their traditional long product markets due to factors such as economic instability, China, anti-dumping cases, safeguard measures, and increased local capacities. Given this situation, are there new markets towards which long product exports will be directed in the coming period? Which region will see the strongest improvement in demand for long products in 2016?
Well, I think we have answered this question. Also, this question has the answer within itself. So we have lost all these countries because of anti-dumping cases, safeguard measures, and all those problems. And as I said earlier, we are now left with few countries where we can do the exports. And I think it will be difficult to develop new markets for rebar exports today. As again, it comes to China because it's blocking us in African countries and in South Asia and Far East countries. So we will be again in our traditional markets, US, UAE, Latin America, Israel, and GCC countries most probably.
Thank you. Next question is directed to the Raw Material Suppliers Committee. Scrap prices have increased by almost 50% during the last 8 weeks in the international market. How do you explain this, and when do you think the rising trend is going to stop? I think you have already answered the explanation part at the beginning.
Well,
the question is,
yeah, of course,
when it is going to stop.
Yeah, as I said earlier, the competitiveness or the shifting of market shares towards scrap-based steel production, since the lower amount of billet coming out of China over the past few months has, of course, meant that, for example, Turkey has not been able to acquire billet from CIS or China in the fashion that they did perhaps a quarter before. So with increased export demand, which has been taking place in the past few months, the demand for scrap has then quickly risen. So it's all about a lot higher scrap demand, which has driven the pricing. And previously, Turkish steel producers were reliant on the domestic market, and now they have perhaps export and domestic. So it's looking a lot. It's looking a lot more favorable for scrap going forward.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? No. Moving on to the next question. This is for the Traders Committee. Amid the increase in global prices, we observe that Chinese export offer volumes have decreased significantly. If Chinese exporters increase their offer volumes to the global market, do you think prices will decrease? This is also
Well, I definitely think so. You know, if it's simple supply-demand situation. If the supply is increased, you can bet the prices will deteriorate and come back to its original case. But I do not think that there is a higher demand anywhere in the world. You know, I mean, we were discussing. I think it's just that the supply was squeezed for a short-term period, and when that supply, you know, when the prices go higher and the supplies go back up again, you will see some correction in the pricing and all that.
Thank you. Any questions from the floor? No questions? I think it was a very explanatory kind of discussion. So yeah, exciting times for the steel industry, long product steel industry in particular. But I think sustainability of the market conditions will still be an ongoing debate. There are differing opinions. I'd like to thank the chairman of the IREPAS committees for sharing their opinion with us and the conclusions of their respective committees. I also would like to thank you for your contributions and listening to us, attending our event, the meeting for these 2 days time, during these 2 days time. I also would like to thank all of the distinguished speakers for sharing their experience and knowledge with us. And obviously, I would like to thank our sponsors, Liberty House Group, Belgian Scrap Terminal, and Yol Bulan Baştur Metallurgy for their unstinting support. As I mentioned yesterday morning, the next IREPAS meeting, the 75th IREPAS meeting, will take place on September 25th to 27th in Vienna. So hoping to be able to see you then. Thank you very much.